What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to discuss if Sidney was underused in Scream 2022. Now, really, there's been a couple discussions around Sidney and Neve Campbell, right, as a person and as a character, in this film. I chose to go this route, but I do want to talk about kind of all of the things that are being talked about with her. And I do think the idea of the usage of her, Dewey, Gale, that was a big storyline going into it, and even leaving Scream, right? There a lot of talk of like, okay, well, how did they use Dewey the right way? Did they use Sidney and Gale the right way? So the first thing I want to address, and I'm not saying, by the way, any of these things are wrong to think or anything like that. You can do whatever you want. You can think whatever you want. I'm just going to tell, kind of my side or how I feel about it. One of the narratives is that, Neve Campbell kind of phoned in the performance of Sidney in Scream. I would say I generally disagree with that. I don't think there's anything that kind of scream. I will say this. She's different than in any of the other movies, but she's also the most unused that I don't even know if that's the right way to put it, but she's used the least amount in this film than any of the other times. So while she does feel different, it's because, in my opinion, again, just in my opinion, A, she's being used in a very different role that we've truly never seen her before, and I'll explain that, in a second. And number two, she's just not in it a lot whatsoever. And maybe if you change those first two things, you would actually get a different performance out of her, but not because she phoned it in, just because you'd literally be asking her to do different things. Does that make sense? Again, that's just kind of where I take it from. Now, when I talk about like using her in a different role, it's funny, right? And it's interesting because when we talk about if she was used right or used enough or not enough, you look, I would say, to Scream 4. So like 1 through 3 is the Sidney Prescott story. It's the Sidney Prescott trilogy. When you look to 4, though, right? The goal of 4, and I've said this before, and people sometimes get upset. The goal of 4 and 5 were generally the exact same, right? I've said, like, the motives are kind of too close to each other. I get them. They are definitely different, but I think from a general movie audience point of view, they're a little close. But generally, the idea of 4 and 5 are actually the exact same, right? Hand it off to a new group of people. Now, I think it was actually a stronger idea in this one, even though I maybe liked 4 better. In fact, I did like 4 better, but I think this was a stronger mindset of, okay, we're handing it over to a new group, because in 4 it was, well, we're going to hand it over to a new group, but the movie you end up getting, Jill is dead, but maybe not dead. Like, we could bring her back. Kirby, we could bring it, but that's it. It's like Kirby and Jill were the only two. Whereas this one, at least now we have a sister duo. We have a Randy, stand-in, two Randy stand-ins, actually, right, in Mindy and Chad, and you also still have Sidney and Gale. So you have a much wider group now, and I think you've established them a little bit better, although I think Kirby is the best character of, well, I don't know, Tara actually I really, really like. So Kirby's strong, Tara's strong, Mindy's strong. We can go on and on from there, right? But talking about Sidney, the idea is in 4, it still kind of was Sidney's story, right? The killings were still generally happening because of her. In fact, the Ghostface, when Roger L. Jackson is talking to her, he does make the point, or I guess Charlie makes the point at the time to say, like, it's not about you, not everything's about you. But actually, in reality, it kind of was. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, when it came to revealing, the masterminds and revealing the plan, they revealed it to Sidney. It was to Sidney, and it was still them versus Sidney basically the entire time. Like, you had a chance at it being Kirby, but then you took her out right before that final, living room kitchen confrontation. So it was still a Sidney thing. So why do I spend so much time saying all that? Well, again, this movie, 5, or Scream 2022, did it differently and did it more in line with literally handing it over to someone else, where it literally wasn't about Sidney. While they made the point to say, like, we wanted or we needed Sidney back, and we've talked about that, like, in a theory-wise, right? I don't necessarily know if they wanted or needed, Sidney to come back. I don't necessarily think that was the most important thing to their overall plan. You could argue it one way or another, but I just don't think it was as important as, obviously, 4, right? 4, again, was happening because of Sidney. This was happening because of other things, and then mainly, you have that Sam-Tara dynamic. So Would I have liked to see Sidney in this movie more? 1,000% yes. I mean, more Sidney, the better. Sidney still being in these movies. I mean, that's just a thing that I've generally always said. And I know it's, again, like it's not everybody's mindset. That's what I think is really cool. Even if I don't necessarily agree with it, it's still cool to see all these different mindsets about Scream. Once 5 came out, I saw loads of people saying they should stop. Don't make a 6, or if they do make a 6, Sidney and Gale should not be in it, this and that. I mean, that's not my mindset, but I've seen it and I totally respect it, right? Everybody's got their own opinion and they're right to it. So it's tough because I would definitely wanted her in it more, and I would like to see her in it more in 6 or 7, right? But the way they did it, honestly and arguably, was exactly how I thought they were going to do it. Extremely limited screen time. I think she was good in every scene she was in. I liked you could say motives or killers aside, right? The general idea of that finale with her, the phone call was so good, right? Even the Amber and Gale stuff outside was really good. So you have that. You have the phone call leading up the stairs. You have the small little fight, in which I would say generally she won, right? And then if you remove the killers, you remove the motive, they had the nice, cool little kitchen scene, right? Super neat. And then her and Gale obviously take out one while Sam takes out the other. So I think, if you just boil it down to that, and that is a very simplified way of looking at it, right? But if you do look at it like that, I mean, I think they did kind of what you would want them to do. Also, Sidney is done. So from a character perspective, and I mean done with this garbage that goes on in Woodsboro, right? So it's if you are this character, you would believe, or if you were this character, you would do the same thing. So us as an audience, I generally would believe we understand why Sidney would be the way she, why would she be in the town? She would need a pretty good reason to come back, right? So and we theorize. I actually made a video, and I can't believe I was actually right? Will Dewey's death bring Sidney back? And yeah, that is what brought her back. She was not, even when Dewey calls, right? We were thinking maybe in the trailer. That was one thing I would say maybe they tried to do, and they actually did a pretty good job of fooling maybe even myself in the trailer, where it's maybe Dewey calls her to kind of get some backup or whatever, but no, Dewey calls her to continue to say, stay away, which continues to push Sidney not in this movie, right? It pushes her out of the movie because everybody's telling her, and she already doesn't want to be a part of it, and then everybody else is telling her, don't be a part of it. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, what would you expect differently, right? I actually generally believe how Sidney would act in this movie is how she should act, right? Now, in a future movie, as I've said, we've theorized it even. I know Sidney doesn't live in Canada in the fictional franchise, but, maybe you take it to her, but, Sam and Tara have moved to her, and maybe there's, a college there. I mean, you could blend different narratives, but, to get her back a second time, you'd have to do something pretty special. The easiest way would actually just be to take the killings back to her, but not have her be the centralized target, just like Scream 2022, right? So that's just a kind of a theory I would say for the next one, which we'll talk about in future videos. But it's tough. Was she underused? I mean, I think her and Gale were not in it a lot. I think they definitely probably could have been in it more. But at the same time, I do struggle to give a definitive yes, they were underused. Because if you think about it, and again, this is kind of rationalizing it, I guess, right? It was Dewey's movie. And I hate comparing this thing to Star Wars, and I don't want it to go down the Star Wars route. I'd want literally anything else besides that. But if you look at it, really is, I think, actually the exact same idea of Star Wars, where Episode 7, Han was in it the entire time he was that mentor character, and then, spoilers, he dies, and that's literally what, Dewey was, and I've said this 1,000 times before in live streams and videos, Dewey was a main character in this movie. Dewey, in terms of his role, was not even remotely close to the role of Sidney and Gale. While Sidney and Gale ended up, I think maybe doing, well, you could argue, did they actually do more than Dewey, or did Dewey, just because of his presence, did he do more? But I guess taking that aside, Dewey was in it a ton. Dewey's death had weight. Again, he was in the first half of the movie, and then the second half of the movie was because of his death, right? So he was I would put him right up there in terms of Melissa. If you do the casting, right? Who's the most important characters here? You put Sam, you put Tara. I would put Dewey right there, top 3, top 4, maybe with Richie, right? I really would do that, and I would never. And I'm not saying in terms of how good they were. I'm not ranking them on that. In terms of how important they were, or even how much screen time they have, those would be probably the top 4, I would argue, right? I would never put Sidney or Gale there because that, And again, like, you could say, well, was that an issue? It could be. You can definitely perceive that as a problem, and I have nothing against that. And maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. But that is how the movie was designed. The movie was designed to not have Sidney and Gale in those top two because it was Dewey, because Dewey was going to die, right? So you have to give him more. Now, again, this is why I say going down the stupid Star Wars route. I mean, Luke was next, right, in episode 8, which I guess would technically be Sidney, but I don't really love the idea of killing either of the last two of them, Gale or Sidney. You're never going to kill Sidney, or Neve won't come back, so I actually really appreciate that about her. I could see 6 being like episode 8, though, in the way of Star Wars, in the way that Gale gets a lot of time this time, and then she dies, and then Sidney maybe would get a lot of time in 7, but she doesn't die, right, which would kind of break the mold. So it's tough. It's tough. I don't think you're wrong by saying they were underused, because I guess you could maybe be arguing, could they have helped the quality of this movie by being in it more? And I think the answer is easily yes, like without a doubt. You know what I mean? But then you'd have to change something. It's all hypothetical, right? Because what would you have to change in terms of dialogue, conversations, plot points, right? You'd have to change things in order to have them be in the movie more. So I wouldn't say you're wrong, but I also would say, you know, again, like going into it, it's kind of exactly what I had thought they were going to do, just not in it too much, a pretty instrumental role towards the last 30, 40 minutes. She was a big part of it. She really was. She was just as much of a part of it as anybody else was, which I respect and I like. And I guess, you know, could she have been in the rest of it? Yeah. But then again, you start to enter, I don't know if you start to enter, but you would start to creep up on, well, you got to be careful, because you don't want to do Scream 4 again. Like, I like Scream 4 actually better, but the idea is you do want to hand this off eventually, and you do have to, at some point, move away from these characters, and 4 still really didn't do that. Now, the idea of 4, 5, 6 in that trilogy was to move away from, you know what I mean, from Sidney, but she was still going to be a really big instrumental part, and there's no arguing in 4, she was still that kind of main target or the main force in 4. And it's like, I don't think they wanted that. And and in terms of handing it off to a younger generation, the way 4 is not actually a good way of doing it. While I do think 4 was like a decade ahead of its time in terms of like rebooting and bringing back legacy characters. Like, they did that. They did that before Scream 5 did that. They did that before Hollywood did it. By easily like 5, 6, 7 years, they beat everybody. But what they didn't beat, and what I think they failed at, was they still put too much emphasis on the legacy and almost not anything on anybody new that you want to give it to. Only Kirby, I would argue. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on so you know when all these videos go up. If you want to follow me anywhere else, all of my social media is in the description below. As always, thank you for watching, guys, and I hope to see you all on the next video.